Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm actually a little warm because I've had to shut my windows to keep it quiet. I have a computer fan that decided to make noise just as we got started all here. But I'm really excited to share my story about not only what I do for work with the Anxiety Coaches podcast, but how I came to be a podcaster with anxiety coaches. So short background, I have been a wellness coach long before that term was being used. I've been a nutritionist for over 20 years, and I worked in my own practice. I worked in my own shop. I worked for spas, eating disorder centers. And one of the underlying things with all of that work were people with anxiety. So it's always been very high on my radar. But one of the things that came up as I was doing work, I would get asked to be on podcasts. So I've been on a number of podcasts for health-related things, and I was always the guest. And being a guest is wonderful. It's easy, right? It's fun. And so I bumped into the Anxiety Coaches podcast and started a conversation. You know, podcasters are, at least in my experience, very easy to talk to and very receptive to new ideas. And so I got talking with Kevin, who was the host, and he had a co-host, which was one of his coaches, been different people throughout. And they brought me on as the nutritionist for the Anxiety Coaches. So I would be a guest on the Anxiety Coaches podcast a number of times. Then they asked me if I would be a coach and take some of their clients, because they had quite a backlog. And I was happy to do that also. It's something I've been doing for many, many years. So long story short, last year in October, so it's just about a year now, you know, Kevin started talking to me about he was kind of tired of a lot of the behind the scenes work, and he had other projects he was wanting to do. And I started to get nervous, like, oh no, he's going to shut everything down. And I won't get into a lot of details, but very quickly, next thing I know, I am the head honcho of the Anxiety Coaches podcast. And I had so little experience technically with and still do, actually. I'm learning as I go. I have beginner's mind, so I always pray that I have people who are listening who are calm enough, even with their anxiety, to let me make a few mistakes and to find my way through. And so far, so good. And so last year, that's how I ended up with the Anxiety Coaches podcast. I never thought I would be a podcaster. I loved being the guest, and I loved listening. I listened mainly to health podcasts and some business ones. And now I'm, you know, who you listen to changes depending on what's important to you in your life at that time. Now I'm listening to Daniel Lewis and Pat Flynn, and I'm trying to get all the information I can to make sure I'm doing the right things or learning as I go. So I have been doing this now for, in November, it will be a year. And the show has doubled in the subscribers and in downloads, and everything looks like it's going in a very nice, very steep upward motion. So that makes me feel happy. And as we heard earlier from Daniel, those reviews also point to the fact that people accepted another change in the podcast, because there had been changes in coaches earlier on. And so I had been a blogger before that. I'm a nutritionist by trade. I'm a coach. I've been in the wellness industry for 25 years, and I was just going along with my stuff. I was blogging, and I really just was a horrible blogger. It didn't agree with me. It felt like a chore. It felt like a lot of work. I didn't get a big response. I had regular people that followed me, but I didn't get the kind of response that I might have been looking for had I had maybe a better writing skill or a better, maybe I didn't do it, on a schedule enough. So I got a little scared when I had this podcast because I thought, oh, okay, now I really have to do this because it's a twice a week show. And I'm sharing this whole story because I want people who are either just beginning, or maybe there are even people who are going to listen to this that maybe have toyed with the idea but have been afraid to do it. Don't be afraid. Listen, I'm 60 years old. I never dreamed of being a podcaster. I have had to learn all of the technical stuff kind of on my own. Kevin was really a trooper, and he gave me 2 days of kind of tutoring, ran me through, Libsyn and Audacity and all these other things terms I had never heard before. Gave me a nice little boost there, and I got going. But I want everyone out there who's even considered doing it, don't let anything get in your way. Really follow your heart on it. I wouldn't have taken it if I didn't have that little spark of excitement about it. Like, maybe I could do this. Maybe I enjoy being a guest. How hard could it be, right? Well, it's hard, but you can learn it. And I'm still learning every day. So I have twice a week podcast. We have never missed a day. So that's just over 2 years that the podcast has been around, and almost a year for me being the host. And I did go through some changes. I changed. Kevin always had either he talked to Coach Brian, or he talked to Coach Kelly, or he would have me on as a guest, or another guest. But I had to take it all so fast. I didn't have time to line up guests. I do have another coach that I have on, Coach Rachel, here and there, but she's not available for a regular co-hosting kind of position. So I said, I guess it's going to be a solo show. So everything just kind of happened, and I was willing to take the reins and just give it the college try. So the show, the listeners have been extremely receptive to the fact that it is now a solo show. I guess they like the topics. The show is only 20 minutes, which seems to really work for me. And it was always 20 minutes with Kevin and Kelly and Kevin and Brian. So I kept the time frame and I kept the schedule, but I did go to solo, and I have occasional guests. I've had amazing authors on, people like Rick Hansen and Michelle Rosenthal, Tom Rutledge. These are people in my industry that are big, published, New York Times bestsellers, and they've been so receptive to wanting to come on the show. Now, I get requests all the time. People want to be on the show, but I've been very protective of the listeners. I've tried to make sure that it's really going to be something that's worth their while. So I guess that's kind of my story of how I got started and how now I've been doing this maybe 10 months, 11 months. And I go to it with beginner's mind still every time. Like I said in the chat box earlier with another speaker, I said I found batching, and it's been a savior for me. And now I have to work on my show notes because maybe they're not Google friendly. And so I'm really trying to figure all of these pieces out. But the listeners have been receptive, so I'm going to keep going. And the other thing that when I was talking to Dave, I mentioned that I also believe that podcasting is a healing modality. I guess I never thought about it when I was a guest, but being the host, reading the mail that I get every day, incredible letters from people saying how just the podcasts alone have helped them to heal their anxiety, their panic, their PTSD. that it's helped them make changes in their lives. Or reading those, I have some great stuff on iTunes, those reviews that say they listen every day on the way to work because it helps to chill them out. And that's not the point of the show, to chill people out. It really is about information. Like I said, I'm a nutritionist and a wellness coach, so I've been an educator for a long time in the health field. But people take that as feeling like somebody hears them, somebody understands them, and they can rest their nervous system just a little bit. And so the longer I do this, the more I really am seeing podcasting as a healing modality, whether it's healing like I do for people with anxiety or panic, post-traumatic stress syndrome, or could be a host of other things. The fact that we are in their earbuds and we're actually with them, that in itself is a part of healing. It's a part of letting in the information that you're hearing. You're not just reading it on the internet and who is this person that's saying this. People have come, like I had a beautiful entry because people were familiar with me already. They knew that I had been talking on the podcast about nutrition, about many of the different ways that they could heal. So they were used to hearing me. So going from hearing me occasionally to hearing me twice a week wasn't that big of a leap. I did find that I got a little nervous about needing to be a certain way, or maybe that I was looking for some shoes to follow. I knew I couldn't do it in the way that Kevin had done it, because he's quite a jokester, and him and Kelly were very chatty together when they did theirs, or if I was the guest, he was very chatty with me. And I like that, and I think people do like that, but it wasn't my way. I'm an introvert at heart, and although I like to talk about my subject matter, I'm not real good about the surface stuff and the weather and sports and gaming. I know nothing about some of these things, so I'm probably not good at having that kind of a conversation. So when I do the solo podcast, I introduce it and I get right into it. Like, we really talk about what the people are tuned in to hear about. And I think that comes across to them as kind of like them hearing from a friend. One of the things that I've heard over and over all these years from clients was that they felt comfortable with me. And I've worked with some really difficult groups of people. I've done a lot of work, 12 years of one-on-one work with eating disordered clients. And they have great difficulty, and they don't feel comfortable when they meet somebody who wants to talk to them about their food. And I'm the last person they want to talk to. And they would always report back to their therapist how comfortable they felt. So I think I've brought that into my podcast, and being able to talk to everyone as I would if they were sitting on my lanai and we were having a one-on-one consult, and sharing the information that I have. But now that brings me to another piece that I love that I do with the podcast is I ask them to send me their questions. There's thousands of people listening. They might as well send their questions. And so I have a plethora of information, but I want to talk to them about what they want to hear. And I get mail every day with questions, very personal questions. And so they either let me know if they want me to read it on air or just use the information, and we take it from there. So very often I have listener question shows where I read their question and I answer it. It's like a free consult. It's like they were there with me. And it's a great place to be if you're anxious, because you get to just put your little earbuds on and you don't have to interact. A lot of people are shy about doing a consultation with someone as an anxiety coach because they're not comfortable. That would be, especially if they have social anxiety or medical anxiety, thinking of us as medical people or someone, trying to help them, they get nervous. So being able to ask a question and send it in the email, and even keeping it anonymous if they choose, is a great way for them to get some personal help. And I love being able to do that. We have 230 some odd shows in our archive right now. And if you can search for whatever problem you're having at the moment, and pretty sure there's a podcast there that can help you in that moment. So it really warms my heart to be able to be doing this. It really makes it worth the time. Like I said, I'm a newbie. I know very little about the technical end of all of this. So it's like I took on a second and third job, because the second job is running the podcast, being the host, coming up with the information. And then the third job is learning all of this technical end. But it's kind of been interesting to me. It's felt like it's kept me a little bit more in the mix of things. I was on Periscope before I did this. And so I kind of felt comfortable talking like that to people just out into space. I'm not particularly real comfortable with video yet, but I could learn lighting, I'm sure, and or hire my daughter. She's a filmmaker and she could hook me up with some good stuff. But it's about doing what my heart needed to do, which is to continue to share this information that I have gleaned over all of these years, because I too suffered with anxiety many, many years ago, and have not been there for at least 17 years since I've had what I would call an anxiety attack or a panic kind of time. So I wanted to share that, and it goes along very nicely with my nutrition background. It's just that blogging was not a good mix for me. I couldn't seem to find my people in the blogosphere. So I had a nice running start because Kevin had started the show. Would I have been able to do it on my own? I actually think I could have, but it would have taken time. I wouldn't be where I am right now, but I would have over time. So I'm really excited that that I get to be here and maybe introduce some people who are just thinking about doing podcasting to the idea of just go for it. If I guess I thought maybe if worse came to worse, it would be my hobby. But I think it's more than that. It really feels like a calling. It feels like a part of my work. So I'm really happy to be able to share it in this way. And what I thought about with podcasting is, like, I've reached numbers of people now, like in a way that I could never have done before. Blogging never would have done this. And like I said, I'm not a video kind of gal, so I probably never would have ventured into YouTube stuff. But I'm amazed at how many people I can reach and how deeply they are reached. And I think it's because of the medium. I think it's because they get to hear my voice. They get to feel me a little bit. Of course, you can get some of that from video, but I think video is somewhat distracting. And I personally prefer podcasts. And even when things are on video, I usually just listen to them, unless they had slides I needed to see or something. But that makes me feel like I'm back in the corporate world back many moons ago. So it's all, for me, like, to meet all of these people now that I've been introduced to since I got to meet Dave, and then Steve, and just being able to just be in the chat with everyone. And it's just such a loving community. And I didn't find that in blogging. I tried to belong to a couple things. I think it was just too big for me, and I'm not a writer. So you got to be who you are. So if you like to talk and you have a message, and especially if you have a healing message. I know that Robin really was beautiful earlier when she had her show. She was talking about changing the world. And my message is about like changing people's lives. And it's like one podcast at a time. They get to learn a little bit more, a little bit more. I look at it as what we talk about is like Robin talked about gratitude, very much about gratitude and love. Like I'm not afraid to use that word. It's about love. It's about gratitude. It's about that positivity that Robin was talking about. I was so excited to hear her today. And being in the present moment. And what could be more being in the present moment than being with someone in your ear? Like podcasting is so coming together with the present moment movement, where people are being mindful and beginning to take a slower pace at life. And podcasting, I believe, has a huge piece in that to play, and really will go far with that, because you get to be present with the person that's talking to you in your earbuds. And it's kind of exciting to me because I feel the two of them are just going hand in hand, and it makes me kind of happy. So, and I'm not a big person on, I love when people were talking about the difference podcasting and radio. And, I did radio way back when I was in high school. I was in junior achievement, and I was with a radio station, and we did a Saturday show, and we all took turns doing each job. And my dad, adorable 80-something-year-old dad, but back in the day, he, this had to be 1972, he taped it on his reel-to-reel, because I was on WSYR radio, and he taped it, and he still has that. And so I teased with him. I said, Daddy, I got headphones on again, but it's a whole different world. It's like a whole different, it's a freedom. What I love about podcasting and about doing my show, and especially doing a solo show, like the world is my oyster. I can talk about what I want. I can have the attitudes that I want. I can be who I am. And so I wish I had found something like this much, much earlier in my life. And maybe it would not have been the same, but it's a beautiful platform for finding yourself, finding your voice, and really finding your inner voice. And so I hope, again, I'm trying to get people out there to take it up if that's what you have in your heart. If you've ever thought, man, I wonder if I could do that. I wonder if I could talk about XYZ, whatever floats your boat. Because it's intimate. And especially when we're talking about what I talk about with my listeners, we're talking about the present moment. We're talking about the perspective of their life, about how to be more grateful in their life, how that this journey that they're taking to come out of their anxiety, panic, and to not be stuck in that loop any longer. I have people that have listened to the show that have had anxiety, panic for 35 years. And they write these letters that say that I did more for them than any of the therapies that they went through beforehand, or the other things that they went through. I won't get into them. And the reason that touches my heart is because they get to just do it for free. They get to just put their earbuds on and do this, listen to these amazing things called podcasts, and get what they've been looking for. Now, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I don't claim to be, even for the anxiety crowd. Like, there are other people that like, they like a male voice, or they like the male perspective, or they like a more aggressive kind of way. And that's great, because with podcasts, you can find that. You can put anxiety in, and you can find a number. There's a number of us. There's not a lot of us, but there's a number of us. And so you can find what works for you. And that's the beauty of this, is I get to touch somebody that I would never have met. She never would have been a regular client of mine. She would have never shown up on my Lanai or on my Skype calls, because it was only through podcasting that we got to cross each other's paths. It's like incredible, because I see daily that their lives are changing. And so how do we do that? What do we do on this crazy podcast that helps people like that? We help them learn that this healing, this way of getting through life without being stuck in an anxious loop or having panic attacks, being afraid of having that fear. We talk about the fact that you can't take a pill for that. Obviously, you can be diagnosed with other things that you may need medications for, but it's not about a pill. It's about a practice. It's about a practice of learning who you are and understanding your own needs and your own fears and why you have them. It's a pilgrimage through life. And even though I've been doing this for so many years with people one-on-one, either through Skype sessions or having them on my lanai, in the rocking chair with a box of tissues in case one of us decides to cry, what I have found is through podcasting, I come on twice a week, right? Well, a lot of people have not heard all the shows. They listen as much as they want, as much as they need. It's kind of a steady stream. And that's why I think it's a good healing modality, because with these kinds of issues, it's not a one-shot deal. Like if you sign up for coaching, it's a long haul. It's not just check-in once. It's a long journey. It's a pilgrimage, and not everybody needs that one-on-one. I have found, so of course I'm working my way through free podcasting out of a job, but it's okay, something else will come along. But people are healing because it's consistent. They can listen to one show a day. They can listen to 2 shows a day. If they're having an episode, they can run through the archive and find something that will soothe them right then. Not particular practices per se, but just being with me or the old shows, Kevin and Kelly, or Kevin and Brian, and hearing somebody who gets it, somebody who's been there. All of our coaches have all been through anxiety, panic at one point in their lives and healed, done the practices, the pilgrimage, and healed and come out the other side for a long period. And just that knowingness that someone else has been there can just begin to let your nervous system settle down. And that's when you can start using your tools and your breathing and, your supplements if you need. All of the things that we talk about, and watching our mind, doing our meditations. But you can't just do it on your own. That's what I found. Again, back to my one-on-one coaching. I found that people may want to come. Maybe they can't afford to come once a week, so they come once every other week. And now, because it never was enough, because you kind of need your hand held. Somebody wrote it in one of the reviews recently. It was like having me with them on their ride to work, holding their hand. If you've never experienced anxiety, panic, you can't understand how much it helps to have somebody with you. And if a podcast can make them feel like that, it's incredible to me. I feel like it's a blessing in my life that I just could never repay. Like, really? That's wonderful, because I can't do that in real life. I can't come with them, but they can plug something in 20 minutes and feel like they're getting a little breather, a little reprieve. So again, I think that podcasting as a healing modality is so important because it's intimate, and it's the consistency and the fact that they can go back through the archives and listen to whatever they need. And it's so easily available. Again, I may be working myself out of a job, but that's what the world is about. Like, let's just help people. And if we could all be better, the world would be like so much more amazing than it even already is. And the fact that the podcasts are free and that whole archive is free, it's amazing. It's I don't know. I think it's wonderful. I wish I had something like that back in the 70s, 80s when I was struggling, to have been able to hear somebody else's voice that knew what I was going through. I think it's amazing. And that kind of communication is really awesome, because we do communicate. They send me email, they send me Facebook messages, they let us know. Amazing story and comments from your listeners. Is that for me? Yes, I do. There's some amazing comments on there. So I think the communication is important, and I'm glad that I've been able, that they're open enough to write. I actually love reading my mail. Some really amazing success stories and some great questions. People suffering and they want questions answered. Unfortunately, we can't answer big, long answers to everybody, but we do give them a little reply and a little love and let them know, a quick tip to help them, or we list 2 or 3 podcasts that would fit the bill for them, and tell them that we'll try to answer their question on the air. So that's really, really kind of fun to know that we're helping in that way. So I don't know if anybody out there, I'm looking at the chat now. I'm not sure if I missed anything or not, but does anybody have questions about starting in podcasting as a total beginner, or about anxiety, panic, PTSD? We deal with obsessive compulsive disorder too, because it's all kind of the same root. So I would be happy to answer any questions that may come up. Otherwise, I can just keep talking and dig into some of the stuff that we do talk about. All right, I'm going to keep going. I'm a podcaster. I can talk. What happens to people? I'll share my own story, actually. When I was probably 18 or 19, I had a chance to go down and see my grandfather in New York City. I lived in Syracuse, and my grandfather was ill, and I was getting a chance to fly down and see him while he was in the hospital and, just reconnect. And my dad was coming with me, and so we flew down. We had a great visit, took care of stuff for my grandfather. And my dad went back early, and I was going to be locking up the apartment, had my luggage. I was going to be going to the hospital one last time before I went to the airport in a taxi. And I didn't set the alarm right. It's kind of a wild thing, those alarm systems in those apartments. And so I came out, I didn't do it right. The alarm went off, and it is crazy loud. It's amazing how loud and startling. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but it had really shaken me up quite a bit. I just do everything right. Finally, I get everything turned off. I do it right. I'm a little disconcerted that big, huge, loud alarm and nobody came, but I was going back to my home in Syracuse, and I get to the hospital. I do all that. It's kind of a stressful thing. I was very close with my grandfather and my pop, and we have our visit. I have to hurry then and get to the airport. I had heart palpitations. I wasn't afraid of being on the plane, but I was totally not comfortable. It was too much. So what had happened is that it happens all the time. Our nervous system gets fried, and we get stuck sometimes. Sometimes not. Sometimes we know how to recover. The body normally knows how to recover, but it depends if you are exhausted, the right circumstances, medications, all kinds of different reasons that you could get thrown into that loop. I was thrown into the loop. Yes, Dave. Do I take listener questions at all episodes? No, not every episode. I do I will do an episode every so many episodes for a listener question. And so that's how I got thrown into this state of an oversensitized nervous system. So did I have other stuff going on? Probably. I was young. Who knows? But I got stuck there, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. Very long story short, I go many, many years of having these times where I would be either overtired or maybe overworked, running around too much. And I would go into an anxiety time or a panic attack. I call it anxiety dash panic. And it would be rapid heart rate. They don't last forever. They're not really long. When I look at it now, I see it objectively. I know they don't last forever. But they happen when you drive. So then you start being afraid to drive. They happen in an elevator. You start being afraid of the elevator. It isn't the driving that's the problem. It's not the elevator that's the problem. It is the fact that our nervous system has become oversensitized and it actually needs rest and recovery. But we don't do that. We keep going because we don't know. And back in the 70s, 80s, there was really nobody talked about it. My story is very long because I have many, many years behind me. But first doctor I did talk to about it because I couldn't sleep. And so he wanted to give me sleeping pills. Back then, I don't know what it was. I declined on that because I kind of just knew myself and I'm pretty sensitive to things. So I didn't do that. I suffered and suffered and suffered. And you think you're crazy, but you're not. You're able to do everything and function, but you have this fear. And what you end up with is you have a fear of the fear coming. So there's nothing going on. There's nothing stimulating you or sensitizing you, but you think it's going to come. It's that feeling of impending doom. Something's going to happen. And I remember having to take a flight from Syracuse to Boston for a particular reason. And that was just on a very little plane, propellers. Well, for somebody who's kind of anxious, and I was very anxious, it was very uncomfortable. And I told God, if you can get me through this trip without me totally losing my mind or freaking out on a plane, I promise that I will write a book. And if I can ever get past this anxiety thing, I will write a book. So I look at this podcast as my book because I'm not a writer. The chances of a book coming out of me are probably pretty slim. I'm kind of busy with my podcast. And I look at it as this is my way of giving back and helping people. When I cried out for help to the universe, and I was able, of course, to get through that trip. And of course, I eventually got through it. But I could have gotten through it a lot faster had somebody actually explained to me what was going on. And that I wasn't going crazy. And it wasn't the circumstances around me that were causing me the anxiety and panic. Just like that alarm didn't do it to me. But because of the state I was in, it triggered me, right? And so it triggered that part of my brain, that reptilian brain that is always on the lookout for danger. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It's going to protect me. It's going to keep me alive. And that part of us becomes so vigilant, so overstimulated and sensitized that we live there. Instead of living up in our prefrontal cortex, these whole other big part of our brains we have to use, we're stuck in this little lizard brain, like always afraid, on alert. And you can't live there forever. It's exhausting. And so that's why when people write into the show, they go, well, have you ever heard of anybody having this, and this symptom? And of course, the list of symptoms that goes with anxiety, panic is huge, because stress affects everything in your body, starting with your gut, right? That's where a lot of people feel it, in their gut. It's the place that you feel when something's off. And when you become afraid, the gut shuts down. That's why digestion, you end up with a lump in your belly, or you end up with too much acid in your belly because you couldn't digest your food. Because when you go into anxiety, it's a danger signal to the mind body. And so everything shuts down except all of your extremities are ready to run or fight. That's why we call it fight or flight. And you're ready for that. You don't need to be digesting your lunch if you're running from a tiger. So you need to just divert all the energy into your extremities so that you can run or fight. And that's why the heart is beating faster. The breathing becomes shallow. There's no time for a meditative Buddha belly breathing when you're running from a tiger. And to your, reptilian brain, that's exactly what is happening to you when you get cut off in traffic. It's amazing, depending on how sensitized people are, how quickly they can just move into that fight or flight kind of reaction. And so that's what we do on the podcast, is we talk about how to switch from that to our wise mind, how to become more peaceful by learning to live in the present moment, to change the whole perspective on our life and what we're doing. It does become a pilgrimage, a journey through our life, because we start looking inside, and you can find a lot of things you don't want to think about sometimes when you look in there. But just like I was not a good blogger, but I'm a better podcaster, we got to face these things, right? I could have kept pushing on. And sometimes when we look inside, maybe we don't like our job. Maybe we don't like a relative or our spouse. I mean, it can come to these things. And it doesn't hurt to look at them, because that's how we begin to find our answers. And being able to take care of ourselves, many of those things resolve by being honest with ourselves. It takes us out of that fear state, or that something's going to get found out state. So the nervous system begins to calm down. And so we have some things that we talk about as far as how you get through it. There's 4 things that we like to do. So I would be remiss if I left this little show without saying them. We learn to face what's happening, because once you become afraid of something and you have anxiety about it, your gut tells you to stay away from it. Let's use an elevator for an example. Somebody had a panic attack in an elevator. They think it's the elevator that's going to trigger them, so they start avoiding the elevator. Well, anxiety then just moves to something else. Okay, then it becomes driving, or it becomes leaving the house, or it becomes driving a particular highway. It can morph into anything. So what we have to do to combat this is, when we do this in a very loving manner, this isn't, you can't fight anxiety. You have to actually embrace it and befriend it and bring it along for the ride. And then it actually leaves of its own accord. So we face it. We face what's going on, what's happening right here in front of us. Okay, I'm the elevator. Okay, I got to get in an elevator. I'm going to face it. I'm not going to run away and take the stairs up 10 flights. I'm going to take the elevator, facing it. And then we want to be able to accept this whole situation, because the second thing that happens after you have faced it and you're actually in it is that you don't want to accept it. This can't be right. I can't believe this is happening again. All of this angst comes up, this negativity, this fright, this more scaring. And what that is that our whole body is just triggered and letting out more cortisol, more adrenaline, And all of that sends signals to the brain that there's danger, and we are looking again, danger, danger, danger. And it becomes this loop that we get stuck in. We get stuck, I call it the fear, adrenaline, fear loop, because the fear makes you get into adrenaline, which actually promotes a lot of other hormones to be released. And then that makes you afraid again, because you start thinking thoughts that are related to that kind of a hormonal situation. So after we've accepted it, it's kind of like, I don't have to like it, but it's here. It's accepting what is. And so once we've accepted it, we float with it. And if you've ever been in deep water and you've gotten frightened, you know that you start to tense up and you become heavier, and your muscles, and you start going down. I mean, you don't really become heavier, but the clenching down, there's nothing to float. You start sinking, and you struggle, and you sink more, and you struggle, you sink more. What you need to do is relax and float. And so that's what we say with the elevator situation also. I've faced it, I've accepted it, and now I'm going to float with it. Now, none of this means that it feels comfortable at all. And that's the mistake that people have. They think that it all feels okay, but it doesn't. So you accept it after you've faced it, and then you're floating with it, which just means that you have befriended this feeling, this hormonal cascade that is just going through your body. That's all it is. It is not a tiger in the elevator with you. It's just your hormones racing. You have faced it, accepted it. You're floating with it there in the elevator, and then you let some time pass, because an anxiety and panic attack will always ebb and flow. It's like a wave crashing. It doesn't go on forever, and they rarely last really long. The only way they last really long is by us becoming afraid of it happening again. And that's what we deal with. That's the anxiety panic loop, that fear, adrenaline, fear loop. You're just stuck in it. You can't get out of it. And it's all very possible to come out of it. Sweet Sue 83, can't wait to check out your episodes. Thank you. I hope that if you need help with that you will check out those episodes. I appreciate you saying that. So that's what we do. We walk through this over and over again. We teach meditation, because all of us who are in fear, anxiety, we have the snow globe of a mind. It's like this, and we keep shaking it up. We bump into a difficulty at our work, or we get a phone call that's bad news, or we watch the news. Well, we take everybody off the news for a while. Certainly go on a news fast if you have anxiety, panic. We change people's diets. There's so many things to do, because each individual has their own places where they're being poked and tensing up with fear. And so we help them to discover what those things are for themselves. And they can ask us questions. They can have them read on the air, which I do like to do. Or we also have a very big free Facebook group, Anxiety Coaches Podcast Facebook group, that has 4,500 members, and they can continue the conversation from the podcast in there. And myself and the admins and the other coaches, we jump in as often as we can to keep the conversation going along the way that the Anxiety Coaching Podcast runs, which is caring. It's about loving. It's about having gratitude. I even have gratitude for my anxiety that I suffered with for all those years, because it's brought me here, right? I wouldn't be here without it. So I think there's a lot in our lives that we can be grateful for. I think finding time to be in the present moment through 10 minutes of meditation a day is a great start. Just being able to see your life from a little bit different perspective can really be helpful. And knowing that the big one, everybody know this, Your thoughts are not who you are. You are not your thoughts. They are simply it's what the mind does. The mind makes thoughts. It's what its job is. Just like our reptilian brain, part of our brain is there to keep us alive. It's just that it got overdone. Same thing with our thoughts. They get overdone because we don't ever settle down. We don't let the glitter in the snow globe settle down. And the way you do that is just to put the snow globe on the table. So for us, that means sit your butt in a chair and close your eyes and just be with your breath for 10 minutes. It's amazing how that can start to rewire your brain. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I have, that's our big Facebook group, and then our Facebook page. Yeah, please join if you have any issues with anxiety. Often people ask a question in there, and I post an episode that would be helpful to answer their question, because the same ones come up over and over again. As you can imagine, as with anything else, it's the same questions, but when it's you that's suffering with it, it's really important that that get answered. This has been really fun for me. I hope that the sound was okay. Things didn't set up quite as quickly. I had a client right up until almost the time that we were meeting here. And I have gotten so much out of this International Podcast Day myself. I'm thrilled to have met the people that I have. And I took all kinds of notes, and now I got some work to do. Got to work on those show notes and a million other things. But so big mahalo to all of you who put this on and that worked so hard to keep it all going.